Mr. Martin is 55 years of age. He is a previous good character and at the material time lived at Bleak House, which is an isolated farm near the village of Ennishuntgate in Norfolk. The farm had been in Mr. Martin's family for several generations, and he himself had lived there alone for about 20 years. Nevertheless, the farm and the surrounding buildings are in an extremely dilapidated condition. The farmhouse, which is almost hidden by overgrown vegetation, gives a distinct impression, on the ground floor at least, of being derelict, or perhaps a building site. On the night of 20th of August 1999, Brendan Fearon and Freddie Barris were driven by a third man from Newark to the vicinity of Bleak House, which they subsequently entered by breaking a window on the ground floor. Both men were wearing gloves and carrying a torch and hold-all bags. Although Fearon denied this, the circumstances give rise to at least a very strong inference that they were intent on burglary. The appellant claimed that he was asleep on the first floor and was disturbed by the noise. At some point, he armed himself with a 12-bore Winchester pump-action shotgun, which was capable of holding up to 5 cartridges, and loaded the gun. He asserted that he went downstairs towards where he'd seen a light. At some point, without giving any warning, he discharged the gun not less than 3 times. Barris was shot in the back and in his legs, and Fearon was also shot in both legs. Although both managed to get out of another window, Barris collapsed and died a short distance from the house. Fearon managed to make his way to neighbouring premises and was subsequently arrested and taken to hospital. Barris's body was found the following day by a neighbour who went to round up the appellant's dogs. The prosecution challenged Mr. Martin's account. Their case upon the first 4 counts was that Mr. Martin, having been disturbed by the approach of the burglars, had lain in wait for them and shot them at short range with the intention of either killing or seriously injuring them. Mr. Martin's case was that because of past experience, he believed his house to be vulnerable to burglary, and the events of the night in question put him in genuine fear for his personal safety, so that the discharge of the gun was in lawful self-defence. During the 20 years that Mr. Martin had lived at Bleak House, the house and the associated farm buildings had been broken into on several occasions and property stolen. It was apparent from his own evidence that Mr. Martin was dissatisfied with the police efforts to track down the culprits and with the general level of protection provided by the police to the property in the area generally. In 1994, he had caught a man apparently stealing apples from his orchard, and as the culprit drove away, Mr. Martin fired at the rear of his vehicle. On a number of occasions at meetings of the local farm watch and in discussions with neighbours and the local policemen, Mr. Martin was said to have made his dissatisfaction with the police very plain. He was heard to express the view repeatedly that self-help was the better way of dealing with criminals. He is said to have used such remarks as, "You know the best way to stop them, shoot the bastards," that if a particular team of burglars returned he would, quote, blow their heads off, and he was also said to have suggested that he would recommend putting criminals in a field and using a machine gun on them. Brendan Fearon was at the material time 30 years of age and has a criminal record stretching back to 1994 involving convictions for burglary, criminal damage, assault and wounding, together with a number of drugs offences. Freddie Barris was only 16, but he also had a number of findings of guilt for dishonesty and bad or violent behaviour, including assaults on the police. He was in fact on bail on 20th of August, and there was evidence before the jury that he had told an acquaintance that he was planning a burglary on a remote farm in Norfolk. The third man, who had driven Barris and Fearon to the scene but had not taken part in the burglary, also had an extensive record of dishonesty and indeed had a conviction for burglary of Bleak House itself. He was said to have admitted to a police officer that he had recommended Bleak House to Barris and Fearon as potentially a, quote, good target. All of these matters were made known to the jury. The only witness who was able to give any account of the events of the night of the 20th of August, apart from the appellant, was Fearon. According to him, as he and Barris approached the farm, they were surrounded and menaced by the appellant's Rottweiler dogs, which were running loose. They retreated towards the farmhouse, Barris clinging to Fearon's shoulder, and broke a window to get into what he thought was a shed in order to escape from the dogs. He used his torch when once in the building and realised that there was another, bigger room into which they moved. This was called the breakfast room. There were cans, bottles, bricks and rubble on the floor, and they were both tripping and making a good deal of noise. Barris was still with him. He was using his torch to try and find a way out when he saw what he thought was a torch, a load of flashing, and heard Fred shout, quote, "He's got me." The flashing came from the direction of the stairs. There was, quote, "a lot of noise, like cans and everything going over." There was then another flash, and he felt his left leg go numb. He frantically tried to get out of the window, eventually ripping the entire window frame out of the wall, and as he was so engaged, there was a further flash, and his other leg was injured. He described 2 shots in quick succession, and then a pause before the third. He got out of the window space, followed as he thought by Barris. He made his way to a nearby house and was able to obtain help. When the flashes occurred, he saw what he described as an old man standing in the stairway. In a taped interview made under caution on the 22nd of August, Fearon said that he had seen a man, quote, "on the stairs," pointing what he thought was a torch at him. In a witness statement made the following day, he said that after the second loud bang, he saw someone standing on the stairs and described his position as being more than halfway up the stairs when he saw him, possibly 3 stairs higher than halfway up. On the 10th of September, he made a further statement confirming that view, saying he saw the man and the stairs quite clearly. However, on the 15th of September, he was taken back to Bleak House with police officers to walk through the route that he had taken on the night of the incidents, and the whole procedure was recorded on videotape. He then modified his previous account to state that he now thought that the man was probably at the foot of the stairs when he saw him and not halfway up. He made this assertion on the basis that when standing at the point at which he thought he was when he first shot, it was only possible to see the very bottom of the stairs and not the whole staircase or even the halfway point. The plans and photographs before the jury made it quite plain that in order to enter the breakfast room in which Barris and Fearon were when the shooting took place, it is necessary to turn to the right at the bottom of the stairs and pass through a doorway or opening in a wall. A person descending the stairs would only be able to have a very limited view into that room until he reached the ground floor level and moved a distance, perhaps 6 feet, towards this doorway. It should also be noted that the bottom 3 threads of the staircase were completely missing, and the resulting gap bridged by an aluminium folding ladder arranged in an M shape. Another gap existed at the top of the stairs. Mr. Fearon was cross-examined about his 28th of August statement, but the change in his evidence about where the appellant was when he first saw him was not put to him, and the final version was therefore not challenged. It seems plain to us, and in the light of the information provided to the court by leading and junior counsel originally instructed, that this course was taken as the result of a considered and deliberate decision by the defence team. This decision is heavily criticised by Mr. Walking QC, who presently appears on behalf of the appellant. When the appellant gave evidence, he told the jury that he had been sleeping fully dressed and with his boots on. He heard noises which alarmed him, and he got out of his bed and went onto the landing, where he saw a bright light coming up the staircase. He became fearful and went back into the bedroom in a state of agitation, his heart beating loudly. He picked up the gun and loaded it, and as the noises from downstairs continued, he went back onto the landing with the gun, picked his way over the gap of the staircase and made his way down. When he was, as he thought, at about the midpoint of the staircase, a light was shone at him which blinded and frightened him. He realised how vulnerable he was to whoever might be behind the light and whom he could not see, and he fired his gun a number of times, but he could not remember how many. At that point he was still at the halfway point on the staircase, and having fired those shots and turned round, we went straight back upstairs again into the bedroom. He remained there for some time, and eventually made his way out of the house to his car to get a torch to look around the ground floor of the house. He could see no one, and did not think at that stage he had actually hit anyone when he fired his gun. He went back into his car and drove around the vicinity to see if there was anybody about, taking his gun with him but could find no one. He eventually went to neighbours to tell them what had happened. He then went on to a house of a friend, where he went to sleep on the sofa until he was arrested. When he was interviewed under caution, he gave an account to the police officers which was basically similar to that which he gave in evidence. He stated particularly that he wanted to make it clear that when he fired his gun, he genuinely thought that his life was in danger. He asserted that he had never got to the bottom of the stairs and had gone no further than was necessary to see into the hallway. That was about as far as he dared to go. He was cross-examined on the basis that his evidence and the account he had given in interview was untrue, that he had heard the two men approaching the house and had readied himself so that by the time they had entered the breakfast room, he was downstairs, lying in wait in the hall with his gun already loaded, and that he had stepped out into the breakfast room and fired 3 times with the intention of killing. Mr. Martin denied this version, but though he acknowledged the effect of the expert evidence about the 2 shots at any rate, he insisted that he himself never got below halfway down the stairs, and that when he was interviewed, he was clear as to where he had been.